Hi, and welcome to the last in our series of webinars looking at the relationship between the finance function and the sales function. So far, we've looked at what that relationship has historically been like and how it can be improved. We look at the systems that underpin where people are at the moment and some pain points around that. The last webinar in the series is looking at the future of the CFO, what the role looks like now, and how it might be changing in the future to embrace new approaches and more value-focused ways of engaging. But before we have those conversations, I'd like to introduce my three panelists today. In alphabetical order, the first is Andy Nellis, who's the MD of Cognition.
Hi, Andy.
Good day, Andy. The second is Raymond Holt from Agnentis Partners. Raymond, good day. And lastly, Stewart Monk, who's the VP and General Manager for EMEA at FinancialForce. Hi there, Stewart.
Hi, Andy.
Great. Thanks for joining me here today, guys. So the role of the CFO historically has been one focused perhaps more on governance and on transaction processing than adding value. We touched on some of that previously. How do you envisage this kind of stuff changing, Raymond, over the next, or how has it changed of late, and how do you see things moving forward?
I think it's been changing. I think with what's been happening around COVID and where we're going, I think it's going to be an even greater emphasis on softer skills. I think there's going to be a real emphasis on. We talked about EQ as much as IQ. I think there's going to be a need to actually have a greater role in terms of being able to see things from the perspective of, for example, in this context, a sales director, but actually be able to sit in their shoes. Greater emphasis on commerciality and really understanding how a business works rather than just how finance works. And I suspect that one of the things which a lot of finance people really struggle will be maybe a little bit fearful of. I think there's going to be a lot more conflict around in terms of when you're building a business, because there's so much challenge, going to be so much challenge and flex and agility and change in the marketplace and everything else. I think there's going to be a lot of conflict in the sense of what do we do now, and are we fit and ready to actually be able to respond to our internal clients' needs as well as our external clients' needs.
Yeah, interesting. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
About the conflict piece?
Yeah.
Well, I think what you're gonna find is that there's going to be competing need for resource from it, for example, between different practices, parts of the business, but also in terms of sales and finance. Good salesmen, good sales directors are going to be a little bit pushy about how they want to grow the business, and I think that's going to require a lot of leaning on the relationships to try and find solutions that we haven't had to deal with before. Find different ways to work together. Finance CFOs are not always comfortable in that place where they're almost having to be combative, but actually no, this does work, this doesn't work, in a way to kind of not play together to get the right answer. It's almost would be more comfortable with a more structured approach to a lot of what the change does that to you, doesn't it? That's going to be a real challenge.
It certainly sounds like a different way of engaging to what we've had historically. Stewart, I mean, your thoughts on that? I mean, are you happy banging clay together?
Well, I think, COVID's probably a great example of how we've jointly developed solutions for our customers working together, right? I mean, finance holds the root cause analysis and has stepped into an understanding that has allowed us to link through to develop solutions. And I think once finance is working with others, it's that shift into the deployment of solutions. And as Raymond said, that requires a change in skill set, right? From technical through to business and problem solving, and as well as change management. So that's the opportunity.
Yeah. Andy, I can see you're agreeing on that around these new kind of skills to have these new kind of clay bashing discussions.
Yeah, I think it's the commerciality, isn't it? It's around, this is a business. Traditionally, finance might have been looking backwards, or what's the latest set of numbers? What does that mean like for like with last year, so on and so forth? But no, let's look forward as an organisation, and how are finance going to work as part of the team to actually define the direction of the business and how the business grows.
One of the things which I think is going to be massive moving forward, and I'd be interested on Stuart's perspective on this, I think a lot of CFOs think team one is finance, is the finance team. It isn't. The top team is team one. So the relationship between the sales director and the finance director trumps the relationship within finance, because fundamentally this is about the business first and finance coming to the business rather than it being about finance. And that's going to be a really different change for a lot of CFOs who view their team as that's the priority. No, it's not. It's not. The top team's the priority, and driving the business forward is going to be the priority.
Stuart, I can see you're kind of agreeing with that message, yeah?
Well, look, finance functions are usually the masters of producing reports, right, within there. But then those products are handed to others to debate and discuss. And I think, that there's an appetite to change that mandate and from finance functions to move from being reporting factories to providing experience that wrap around the reports that they produce. And finance function it should be a questioning role involving constant horizon scanning and then alerting the business to strategic opportunities or threats based on that. I mean, that's true business partnering, yeah?
Mm. Those things are slightly different perhaps to where they are at the moment. What challenges do you perhaps see coming ahead in order to help finance address those, Stuart?
So you've got to provide insights into the drivers of organizational value, and that means pivoting to contributing to decision making, including defining objectives with regards to developing the business models. And that's where I think there's a natural partnership between sales and finance in particular. Yeah.
And Andy, any challenges that you see above and beyond this idea of a sort of shared way of looking, one shared business model? What other challenges might you see?
I think it comes back to Stuart's point earlier around change. So I think everyone can understand what the future needs to look like and what that structure needs to look like. But turning that, certainly for organisations that have found it hard to pivot, Raymond often uses analogies of speedboats and oil tankers. So, the ability to move and change rapidly and how an organisation embraces that, I think there's a real change aspect to that, that's really crucial right now.
Raymond, the speedboat driving CFO, is that you?
Well, the challenge is you end up with a lot of businesses who are speedboats who think like oil tankers, and what you actually want to be is an oil tanker that's got the agility of a speedboat, and that's very, very. And one of the challenges for me about the CFO role moving forwards to enable that to happen is CFOs have got to be far more educators about what we understand, how we see things, and how we share our understanding, so that those around us, including sales directors, are able to understand the business through our eyes. But on the flip side of that, CFOs have to be able to sit in the shoes of a sales director and understand and have an appreciation for how sales directors are looking at the business as well, and in some ways bring the two together, which is the left brain right brain thing is just really not a natural way for a CFO to behave or to be. But that's where it's going, and we have to get ourselves into that space.
Stuart, this point about we've touched on EQ, and we've talked about different ways of different skills that people have to have in this new, more flexible and agile perspective. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've had to bring about those changes within my own sales organizations. When I ask customers what makes for a good visit from a salesperson, they tell me it's two things. One, they want to be educated in terms of what their competitors in other industries like them are using technology, what they're getting out of it. And number two is they want to be listened to. And so, I can teach content. The more interesting one is how you develop around listening skills, empathy, and those are the things that I think, from a finance perspective, accounting qualifications are maybe your entry point, but really what progresses your career, it's your general commercial acumen and your social skills in the workplace. I think is true for all of us.
It's the ability to manage those stakeholders, is it, Raymond?
Yeah, and understanding who the stakeholders actually are, because I think traditionally we go, oh, it's the board of directors, or oh, it's the share, and it's not always. It might be the project manager or the account manager for the client. He's the one that you've got to manage to make sure he is informed of everything that he needs to know. And we sometimes forget that it's not, you've got to really know who the stakeholder is in this conversation.
Yeah. So slightly different world. Andy, what specific challenges do you think our CFOs might have in adopting these new ways of working, these new ways of engaging?
So I think I know we'll inevitably come back to how does technology enable that, but I think, right now some CFOs are still working with technology that doesn't really enable them or give them the information they need to work in a future thinking way. They're always, they're still looking backwards because they are used to just, effectively delivering reports that talk about what they did this month and what it was like this time last year. So I think it's the technology, the predictive analytics, looking to the future, forecasting revenue and utilizing everything that a cloud technology can bring today in terms of giving them that insight and foresight in terms of the business and its future direction.
So Raymond, do you think that this CFO of the future is dependent upon technology?
Yeah, I think technology, Stuart's mentioned in the past, technology needs to do and provide the insights to enable the CFO to be able to occupy the role that they need to do in terms of business development and understanding what's happening within the business. I think the challenge right now is that, I think Andy's right, a lot of time and effort is spent, one, looking backwards, or two, actually, one, creating the information, two, which is so far out of date anyway, by the time you get it, that actually, by the time they're having a conversation with a sales director, the sales director's thinking 3 months ahead of them, and they're still running to catch up. And I think that's one of the things which is, well, fundamentally what CFOs are going to have to do. And if you work in an entrepreneurial environment, you do this every day, is you are going to have to run to keep up with the business while you build it behind you. The business cannot wait for you to build it. You have to jump over and and build it behind you, get the technology to work to give you the information, and you have to manage the relationships at that point. And that's a big confidence. That requires a lot of confidence from a CFO.
Yeah, Stuart, you engage with a lot of CFOs in your sales engagements. What are your thoughts on the technology that they're looking for to enable them to add value into the organisation in the way that Raymond's kind of suggesting?
Well, I think the value add when you can provide insights and establish metrics that matter against your organisation, that you're driving things in a consistent way forward on there. But I don't think, the technology component is one of three, I think, the powerful attributes. One is the people, the talent on board. Technology has a part to play in the way in which we recruit and are able to bring in diverse talent. You've then got processes. I've alluded in previous conversations around, don't spend time redefining requirements when best practices are sitting in standard solutions. And particularly now, you've got the opportunity to bring the front and the back office together on platforms like ourselves, which give you one view of the customer shared. So it's people, processes, and then use the innovation that technology can bring to allow you to take both a current and future view of your business and get alignment across line of business.
Yeah, that's interesting. A lot of what we've seen at the moment with the COVID crisis, we're seeing people using the home working tools, the Zooms, the chatters, and all that sort of stuff, and also looking to extend into the areas of communities and working more collaboratively with partner channels and with customers in a sort of a community rather than in a traditional sort of silo. Is that your experience, Andy?
I think it's one of the things we've definitely noticed in recent times, and the cloud platforms enable this, is organisations that wouldn't previously have communicated in terms of being in different sectors or potentially being within the same sector but competitively, those organisations are much more open to sharing best practice and sharing the things that work for them as an organisation around technology. So whether that's dashboards, reports, and so on and so forth. So just, how do we get the best out of the products we're using, and how do they deliver the value that we're looking for? Yeah, organisations are more open to sharing that insight.
That's great. Raymond, can I leave the last comments to you as our resident CFO? How do you see the role of the CFO over the next sort of 6 months, 2 years, and what do you need in order to help you deliver against that requirement?
No, it's a really high people-based role first now. People skills, I think Stewart's alluded to that, in terms of being able to communicate and actually be able to articulate what finance does and understand. I think then you've got a big high commercial aspect of what is going to be needed, and that agility and understanding what levers are pulled to actually deliver the results that are actually being delivered, and how to influence those levers so that you can actually improve the performance and the resources available. And then on the third bit is around the getting, as Stewart's also said, about getting the machine to work the most effectively the way it can, and actually almost learning from our peers in that respect, and actually turning around and saying to people like Stewart and Andy, do you know what are my competitors doing, what is working for them, and how much of that can we get in here, because it will just move us forward 3 steps rather than trying to do it ourselves. That's a really diverse view of the kind of plates CFOs are going to have to spin all at the same time, all whilst the world is changing around them. Yeah,
that's interesting challenges for us all ahead. Thank you to all of my panelists. Some really great insights there. Andy, Raymond, Stewart, thank you so much indeed for your invaluable contributions. So the role of the finance, the CFO and the sales directors, goes hand in hand. It's business centric, it's customer centric, heavily reliant upon technology, getting the fundamentals in place, and then being able to truly engage and horizon scan what is out there, how it can work more effectively in order to deliver better business performance. And I think one of the lessons of COVID is that when people come together and collaborate and engage and share, then the potential to manifestly improve our organizations as well is very profound. So thank you very much indeed, lastly, to the panel. There is an ebook that we've put together, which is available for download, which touches on a number of the subjects that we've discussed today. But that just leaves it to me to say thank you very much indeed for listening, and thank you for your time.